Bill Fleming's a local business consultant to design firms over the last 25 years. He works with small firm architects, graphic design studios, interactive firms, product designers, and most of his clients are with firms of 20 people or less, and often solo practitioners like a lot of you all. Some clients call him the small business therapist. And by the way, when I read that, Bill, I almost called you immediately and asked for a session. It's really good marketing.
There was one client that said it to me, and when I mentioned it to a different client, they're like, "Yeah, that's about right."
Yep. So it's important for him to balance between what the principal's well-being and what the work for the business to be viable. So he's also an adjunct design professor teaching professional practices in design at Leslie Art and Design in Cambridge over the last 8 years. He's a rower, a gungle. I don't know what that is. So you have to explain that one.
Yes, know what a gungle is? It's a gay uncle. We're the best kind of uncles. I'm a gay uncle.
Uncle. Oh, there's 2 G's in what I'm reading. Okay. Yep, got it. And truth seeker. He's led a few workshops for Small Practices Network in the past, and he's glad to be back for this one. And there will be a follow-up one next month in person, which maybe you could sort of introduce at the end. And yeah, so I'll hand it over to Bill.
Sure. Hi, welcome everyone. So I am going to ask, I'm happy to make this a participatory back and forth conversation. I'm going to keep my chat window open on the side. If I can just have Susie or Ray or Kyle just monitoring the chat, that if it's something I'm missing, please call me to it. I'm also using the reaction buttons down below, whether you want to put your hand up to ask a question or to give a response to something. So try and use those features as much as possible. And our time is ending at what time? I want to make sure that I'm calibrated here. We want to end at
we usually end at 1:30. So 1:30. No pressure, I'm sure.
So I'm going to try and wrap up the workshop part of it about 1:10, and then I'll leave the remaining 20 minutes for any Q&A. So perfect. Welcome everyone. Thank you. Nice to see some familiar faces. Nice to see some familiar names that I don't know the faces for, and then nice to see some new people here too. I've been involved with the Small Practices Network with BSA, like 5 years ago. Christina had brought me in for a few things. Previously, I was involved with the, I'm concurrently involved with the marketing PR practices group. Eons ago, I run a couple of roundtables, and I participate with some of their stuff as well. And so I'm gonna just give you a little teaser as to who I am. Let's see here. If I share, where'd you go? Forgive me, it's been a while since I've actually done an online webinar. I got plenty of practice during the pandemic. Great. So right now you can see my screen? Great, excellent. So hello and welcome. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a business consultant for design firms. I work with, my career started off with, and the bulk of my clients are graphic designers or graphic design firms. I also work with interactive firms and small architects. The things that I get involved with are branding and marketing. So I get involved with brand positioning for the firms. I do client surveys to help better understand what are some of the weaknesses and strengths of the firms that I work with. I do competitive analysis to compare how my client is doing, how the firm that I'm working with is doing compared to other firms that they're competing against. I also do copywriting and messaging, email campaigns, develop marketing plans, and so get involved with social media marketing. It's kind of on the right brain side of me. On the left brain side of me, I get involved with business operations. So I do get involved with business planning, design operations, financial analysis, project management systems, proposal development, small business therapist, helping to navigate principles where it's like, is this normal? And I could be like, yeah, that's pretty normal. Or is this normal? Like, nah, not so normal. In terms of dealing with the staff person or dealing with the client, and then staff development issues as well. I've worked with a spectrum of all different types of design firms, from graphic architects, interactive through the years, many of which are still active. I think communication view design has been an active client of mine for about 25 years. And the number of them are about eight or so years. And then, as Susie mentioned, I also teach adjunct design faculty at Leslie Art and Design in Cambridge, where I teach professional practices in design, which is a combination of focusing on career development for designers, entrepreneurship for designers, got a little bit about financial management and money matters, leadership skills, marketing essentials, personal branding, project management basics, and crafting proposals. I'm also available on LinkedIn. I ordinarily only connect with people that I actually meet, so congratulations, we've met. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, by all means, you're welcome to connect with me. I'm Bill Fleming on there, and you see with the brown paper bag motif. So let's begin. So one of the things that I'm mindful of is that when you're running your business, there's a whole series of things that has to happen, and they typically keep on, one fuels into the other. So getting in the work, doing the work, managing the work, making sure that people are managing the work right, having the money to pay the people to manage the work, having the administrations to make sure that you have the money to manage the work, which then fuels the marketing, which then fuels the business, and around we go. So I'm mindful that marketing is one component of the spectrum of things that you all work with as principals of a small firm. And I want to address differentiating branding, marketing, and sales. So branding is, what are your attributes? What are the things that you offer? What's your value to the clients that you work with? What are your, what makes you a company or a firm or a person that somebody would want to hire you? So establishing your attributes. Marketing is more about generating awareness, sending that signal out, and making sure, oh, there goes Stan. Look at that. Stanley wants to be in the screen. Hey, buddy. Hey. Setting out the signal so that people are aware that you exist, and generating awareness for those prospects. And then there's sales, which is reeling in when you have the outreach part of it and you start engaging with people to get them to a place where you're trying to convert people who are engaged with you into leads and making decisions to want to hire with you. So that's how I see the difference between branding, marketing, and sales. Some of you may be familiar with this. If not, happy to give a quick overview of this. The marketing funnel has become sort of an essential metaphor for how marketing gets structured. Oftentimes large organizations work with this, but it can work with even small organizations. So in the beginning, you want people to be aware of your organization and what you offer. And ideally, you want to be able to create some interest for them to engage with you. And beyond that, just not only interest, but some way of dialoguing with you to get some consideration. And then with that, you're sort of generating leads, then you're sort of nurturing those leads that come in. And then within that, you're trying to bring them in for sales. So understanding what the intent is, what they want. They're evaluating probably a couple of different options. and then making a decision that they want to hire you in particularly. A lot of firms focus in on, a lot of small firms focus in on the lower part of like, I want people to consider me. I want people to get us in. I want people to, I need sales now. I need sales now. But the reality is that this is just as important to make sure that people are aware of you and to make sure that there's constant messaging out there, because you don't know when people are going to make the decision on when they're going to be looking at the next architect that has the services that you offer. And so what you want to do is you just want to make sure that there's awareness of them throughout the year, throughout whatever channels it need to be, that you know that they are on. So again, this is where a lot of people try and focus their energies, and they get disappointed if things don't happen fast. But the reality is that you should be able to do it all in a way that brings somebody from awareness into consideration and ideally purchasing decisions. Does anybody have any questions on the marketing funnel? Either raise your hand or. I'm gonna move on. So, let's talk one little thing about marketing that I want to establish here, and that is there is a difference between marketing your business to another business, and which, if you're working with commercial real estate, for example, you're selling to other businesses. Versus business to consumer. So if you're working with residents, and particularly homeowners, as opposed to real estate investors, you're dealing with consumers, and there's slight variations of how to find business to business versus how to find B2C, and there's certain variations on what your messaging should be. With B2B, you can be a little bit more direct. With B2C, it may need to be a little bit, lack of a better word, softer. That you can certainly be soft with B2B, and you can certainly be direct with B2C. But I just wanted to establish that the way that you go about doing business in the B2B space, marketing in the B2B space, can be different than in the B2C space. So, for example, in B2B, you likely are not going to find contacts as easily or exposure easily on Instagram or, heaven forbid, TikTok or Facebook. You might find some, but basically you might be more valuable in having exposure with any of the real estate trade organizations, if there's any network groups within the real estate trade organizations, if there's magazines or certain platforms that they have, having your exposure there. B2C, sure, Instagram might be a great place for it. Facebook maybe could be a great place for it, depending on the generation that you want. Even TikTok would be a great place for B2C. Not advocating TikTok, it's a whole other level. But that's where consumers are that are looking for homeowners in particular, that they're using those platforms the most, and that's where they're likely going to be having the opportunity to get exposure for what your firm offers if you're looking for work with residential work. So one of the things about marketing, and I don't know how this will translate online, but there's two modes of marketing, and one, hopefully we'll see what this happens. One is called spray and pray, and you hopefully can see this here, and you're just like, I'm gonna throw everything out there and see where it goes. But really, what you want to be doing is you want to be target marketing and hit a stream and go after specific areas. Hopefully this is translating okay over the web, but the attitude of a lot of small businesses is that I need to get as much stuff out there to as many people as possible to do all these things. It's like, no, you need to stay focused in on no more than 3 targets at a time, ideally 1 at a time, and see how that's doing, give it some time. And if, whether it's the span of 3 months or 6 months, that target doesn't work for you, you then have to make an assessment of, can you do something to improve it, or do you pivot and do something different? But to have the notion of being everywhere all the time, or as the movie is, everything everywhere all at once, it's not the best use of your time and energy. There's spray and pray, or there's also called stream and dream is another way of putting it as well. And so my focus with working with you folks today with the DIY marketing plan is to give you some focus areas. So I'm curious. I was going to create a Slido survey, but I'm just going to keep it simple and keep it in the chat. What are some things that you are either struggling with or you enjoy doing with marketing? If you can put that in the chat, what are some things that you're struggling with? Because I want to see if I can help address those while we're working. Yep. Yep. So prioritizing it over billable, being consistent. Finding the time to do the marketing. Yep. How casual or formal to be with marketing. That really depends on your audience. Making something fun versus something that I dread. Yeah. Doing it versus networking. Yeah. They go hand in hand. Marketing and networking go hand in hand. Go for two more. Okay, go for one more. There you go. Where to start? Yeah, right. So I am going to put in the chat a form. Let's see here. So go into the chat window and you'll see a form. It's a PDF form. It's about 6 pages. Download it onto your computer. Unfortunately, when I last did this workshop, it was in person and and I had handouts that I printed out and gave it to them. You have a couple of options here. One is that if you have a printer nearby, you're welcome to print it out. Again, it's 6 pages. It's black and white. If you don't have a printer nearby, keep it up on screen and you can use a notepad next to you to go along and through the process and use the form as a guide. Let me know if anybody has a problem getting the PDF. Let me know. I can see what I can do to help out with that. Great. Can everyone please give me a thumbs up that if you got it and you're able to download onto your computer? Great. Great. Anybody thumbs down that you're stuck? Thumbs down, Christopher. All right. Christopher, if you have your audio on, can you tell me what happens when you click on it?
I'm sorry. I'm a technical moron.
That's okay.
And I don't understand how I'm supposed to do this.
So do you see the chat? Do you see the chat window?
I'm looking at the chat window.
Do you see the BSA marketing PDF form?
No.
If you look at the very bottom, so the second to last text is from Salma Noor and it says from where to start. And then below that, there's one from me at 12:20 p.m. that says BSA marketing.
Don't see any of that. Wait a minute. I've just changed the windows, maybe.
Is there anybody else having problems? Christopher, the other thing I could do is I could email it to you if you put your email address.
Okay. That's the participants.
Yep. So what you want to be doing is clicking on, there's on the bottom.
Okay. Small practice marketing workshop. Is that it?
Yep, and at the very bottom, do you see a couple people with comments on there? See if I can do it this way.
No. I'm lost. Download.
Christopher, if you can put your email address in the chat, I can email it to you directly.
Okay, thank you. I will do that. How do I? Oh, shit.
Can you hear me?
Tell you what, Christopher, you can tell me. You can just tell me your email address is.
CA Haynes 26 at Gmail.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to slow down for me, please. Say it again.
CA Haynes 26 at Gmail. I think I've just sent it.
C.A. Haynes
HAINES
26.
26 at Gmail. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Now it doesn't want to send anything. Doesn't send.
All right, should hopefully take about 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm useless at
okay.
this.
That's why I asked if people were having trouble with it, to make sure you got it. And my suggestion to you, Christopher, is once you do get the email, save the attachment onto your desktop or into a folder so it doesn't get lost in the abyss of email attachments.
I have it.
Great, excellent, welcome aboard. So, let's see here. Screen. Next. So what I want you all to do now, first of all, write your name on your top. I know you're you. Write your name on the top and today's date. Sorry, I don't have a space for that. Oop. So some architects typically have one industry they focus in on, and an industry could be residential, for example. But even within residential, it could be multi-unit residential versus single-family residential versus historic preservation residential. So there might be even things within that. But for others, there may be things where you work on projects with academics or schools, whether it's K through 12 or higher education. What I want is for you to write down in at least one of these circles, what is an industry that you focus in on serving? So again, if it's residential, give some specificity to it. If it's commercial real estate, maybe it's a specific sector of commercial real estate. Could be doing labs, wet labs, could be doing auditoriums, could be doing, well, just industries focusing on like, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here, forgetting the projects, but industries could be biotech, it could be life sciences, it could be academia, it could be, so again, at least one, no more than 3 to fill up each of these circles. Again, I'm going to keep the chat window open so that if you have questions, you're welcome to, and or if you want to raise your hand, by all means. And again, if you can write this, use a notepad to the side. You can't print this out. Does anybody have any questions on what I mean by industries? All right, you guys are pros. So now under, so these are now in columns. So under the first industry, that first circle on the left, below it is a diamond that says projects. What are the types of projects that you currently do and or would like to do? So maybe you could put a check mark on the ones that you already do and the types of projects that you want to be doing. So again, I'm going to focus in on residential. Maybe you're known for doing kitchen rehab, and maybe you want to do more kind of multi-use kitchens in terms of live, dine, cook, sort of more familiar settings. Maybe it's restoring or gutting an existing home. Maybe it's building a brand new home with a new envelope. Maybe it's a multi-family home. Maybe it's a single family home. What are the types of projects that you are known for? And then if you want to add to that, put check marks next to them. And what are the types of projects that you would like to aspire to do within that industry? Does anybody have any questions on that? You guys are rocking. All right. So the next thing is, who are the people that decide to hire you to do that work? So I, at the risk of repeating myself with a residential, maybe it's the homeowners, or maybe it's a developer. Maybe it's a real estate conglomerate. Maybe it's a HOA. Maybe it's a who are the ones that are deciding on hiring you for those types of projects? If you're in the B2B space, say for example, if you work for life sciences, what is it, the chief operating officer of the organizations? Is it the VP of facilities? Is it a safety officer? What are the types of people? What are the titles of the people that would be hiring you in those instances? And the other thing I want you to think about is, who are the influencers? So sometimes you might have, for example, the CEO might be the ultimate decision maker, say for commercial real estate. The CEO might be the ultimate decision maker with it, but the CFO is the one that's going to give the green light for it. And the COO is the one that's going to be influencing, like, yes, we need to go with this person and that person. So the COO may not be the decision maker, but they'll influence the COO with it. So know who are the people that are the influencing the decision makers specific to that industry, those types of projects, and again, working in that column. Does anybody feel stuck or lost with doing that first column, or do you feel, or even overwhelmed?
Well, one question I have is, do you think it's better to like, just to stick with a residential example, because I think that's relevant to a lot of people on this call. Do you think it's better to be really granular at that top level and say, like you were giving examples of like kitchen renovation versus ground up house, whatever? Do you think it's better to separate those into different circles?
Yes.
And then kind of map out the projects and decision makers below, or to batch them and then?
I think it's better for you to be, so are you saying, yeah, so if it's the same audience but different types of projects, I think that you should be granular with those different type of projects. If it's the same type of projects, sorry, if it's different types of projects that there are different decision makers with it, I would move that onto the other column. So in other words, let's say if it's a residential that's done by the owners, if it's spouses that are making the decision, whether it's a kitchen rehab or whether it's a gut job for a bedroom, if the same people doing both those decisions, that stays in the same column. But if it's a developer that you're working with, a real estate developer, and they are looking at redoing for condo units, those would be different types of people, and so they would be in their own column.
Cool, that makes sense.
Okay. And it's tricky because, yeah, you want to be granular, but you sort of want to cluster the same audiences together, and like sort of how do you promote those things to the same audiences, and versus when it's a different audience, even though it's the same type of work, that's actually different. You have to focus on your marketing efforts a little bit differently with them. How you approach it, real estate developer is going to be different than how you would approach residential owners. So I want to just take a few minutes. If you want to do column 2 and or column 3, if you just have that one column and that's your focus, that's fantastic. It's going to make it easier for you to focus. If you have a second industries, particularly for those of you that might work with a spectrum of real estate and commercial, residential and commercial, you might want to have with the commercial, what are the commercial industries that you would typically work with? Is it higher ed? Is it office space? Is it lab space, life sciences? Maybe it's parks or indoor sports venues or something like that. And similarly for that industry, what projects have you done, a little check mark, and or would aspire to want to do? And then in the box, who are the people that would be deciding on whether to hire you, or the people that would be influencing that person to decide to hire you for that type of work. Again, if you have one column, that's great. 2 columns, good. 3 columns, fine. You don't get extra points for having all 3 of these done. Just whatever's helpful for you. Any questions before I move on with this? So the reason why I am having you work on this is to find niches. So there's a big talk within a lot of firms that should you have one niche? And for many, that might work well for them. I actually think there's a lot of value in being niche focused. So niche focused might be specifically residential, high-end kitchen, and that's your niche. Others might be multifamily, open land, and that's your niche. Or maybe you have multiple niches as well. But what this exercise is trying to get the industry and the project type to help you get some sort of focus as to what are you trying to promote. You're trying to promote to this particular group of this particular industry. Again, residents could be a part of it, and for this particular type of work. And when you have the decision makers, who they are, the decision influencers, that's your target. So that's when it gets into the spray thing. Instead of the spray and pray, it's putting on the stream and saying, okay, I'm going after this particular target. And maybe you do that for a couple of weeks, maybe you do that for a couple of months, see what works. You either reassess and determine whether you should be doing something different and to press forward with it, or maybe you realize it's not working for you and you pivot and you find a different industry, a different product type, and a different target to go after. Be nimble. So here are some examples of things that different types of industries that maybe some of these might resonate for you. So maybe you're in the commercial space, maybe you're in the academia space, maybe you're in healthcare, maybe you're in cultural. Again, a maximum of 3 audiences to promote to, ideally 1 or 2. Also think about with your commercial audiences, are they national? Are they regional? Are they chains or independents? And there might be some crossovers. There could be libraries, could be academic or municipal or private libraries for that matter. And then the types of work that you could be doing within these industries. So for commercial, it could be cafeterias, for example, office complexes, or retail or mixed, labs, lobby and common area, offices. For residential, condo complex, multifamily, maybe it's additions or landscaping or kitchen and bath or new construction. Academia, colleges and universities and daycare, maybe it's a campus center or wayfinding or classrooms or dorms. So these are examples of the types of industries. And these are the examples of the types of projects. Some of these may resonate with you, some of these are not at all what you're looking for, but I wanted to just give you a taste of what it might look like, what some of these might look like for you. Any questions so far? How are you doing? So on the next page, page 2, this is a chance for you to come up with your own brainstorm of ideas of what is some content that you could be putting out there to be promoting. And you don't have to address every single one of these. These are prompts for, like, maybe you have some how-to stories and some origin stories about how we began, and that's an interesting piece of content. Maybe something about seasonal posts, you know, that some of your projects typically have a seasonal cycle to them. But write down your own content idea, who the audience is for that, and when's an ideal time to start promoting it. Don't think about where to promote it just yet, just in terms of, you know, whether it's in the spring, or maybe it's the month of March, or maybe it's the first week in March. You can get as specific or as open as you want. Evergreen means any time of the year. So if you have any project success stories, you know, the important part of it is, why was it successful? What did the client say about it that was successful? What did the community say about it that said it was successful? maybe it's anecdotal. People appreciate it, makes it easier to do the things that they want to do in the space. Maybe it's quantifiable. They, expanded 20% extra usable space, saving on budget, maybe buying materials that that will not only benefit the environment, but our cost savings within the first 2 years. Maybe it's a process story. Again, you can just scribble these, and this is by no means like, this isn't to capsulate the list if you wanted to use multiple papers, but I just want to get you today just sort of thinking about possible stories that you have about either your work, your know-how, about how you began, if there's anything that's newsworthy, if you won awards, if you hired somebody, if there's any seasonality. Anybody have any questions? Or anybody struggling with this? Or does anybody have no
This is
shortages of ideas? Huh?
a pretty big question, so
Sure.
feel free to dodge this one as
Okay.
you see fit. I feel like something that I have trouble with when doing this kind of exercise, well, for one, letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, that's a big one.
Yeah.
But two, I think so putting myself into the perspective of my audience. So
Yeah.
if it's a homeowner, that feels a little bit easier to me because I come from a family that's not architects. So I can just sort of, like think of my conversations with them and whatever. But when it's somebody like developers, say,
Yeah.
who I have worked for, but I have really no expertise in that domain, I'm wondering if you have any exercises or ways you could recommend that we kind of, beyond just being like empathetic humans, how could we sort of learn more about our potential audience to, give them the kind of things that they may want?
So how is it that you could do work with, you said developers, is that right? But you're not an expert. Will you
Well, I guess
carry-
what I mean is I don't think I'll ever be an expert in architecture or interior design or any of the things, right? Like I'm clawing my way towards that slowly through time. But I feel like the development side of things, I and Kristen and I used to work together. So we worked with developers, but I feel like they were very not secretive, but like, there wasn't a lot of transparency into kind of what they were doing. We were experiencing like we experience any other client. And so I can imagine, but I think as someone who typically likes to do a little bit of research and like read some things and all that, I feel like it's my experience is very subjective and very specific to, for developers in a really big field.
Yeah, but the reality is you do have an experience. So let's say that I was to call one of those developers and say to them like, hey, so what was Kyle like to work with? Do you have a sense of how they'd answer me? I don't want to put you on the spot and say what the actual answers are, but you're welcome to if you want. But do you have a sense of that they would give me certain answers like, oh, he was great with this, or I really like working with him because this is something he approached it this way, or it could be about your personality, it could be about your approach, it could be your way about navigating conversations with different stakeholders.
Yeah.
So you have experience working with developers, and maybe you don't have as much experience as what you want with them, but the fact is that you do have experience working with developers. And so without bullshitting it, like, what are the things that you brought value to when you were working with those developers?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That seems like a good way of framing it.
And it isn't always creative, right? I mean, because every project has its own backstory. Like you as a creative versus a developer, there's always going to be this push-pull. So, but in terms of you navigating things so that the outcome was great because of your diplomacy. Maybe those aren't words that I would use for promoting yourself with it, but
I hope this question is helpful for other people. So I just don't want to like take over the conversation. I think one thought I had though, to use your example, is maybe one thing that they would say in my case is I was very organized because I was in a sort of project management role.
yeah,
And I think if I think of that as the potential value add, it feels like a little bit, I guess when I'm looking at your list, I'm thinking about these as things we could share out in the world as like a blog post or a PDF you can download from our site or something. And so my brain starts to think about them as useful information that we could share with our potential clients. And maybe I'm just bringing too limited of a framework. But
No,
it sounds like it could, go ahead.
I think that the you being organized is a skill, but you being organized that created something that added value to something, that expedited something, that brought people together. What was the result of your organization? That to me is more valuable than you being organized, because everyone can say they're organized. But if you can say what the result of what your organizational skills were in that instance, then you're speaking to the value of your organization and not just simply that you're organized.
That makes sense. I think I was just wondering maybe if like show of emojis or head nods, if others feel like many of the things that we could tell clients, like if I put myself into like pitching myself mode, are like, I'm a good listener, I care, like it seems like things that everyone would say or think about themselves, even if they're totally delusional and they're none of these things, they would say it in a RFP or, on their website or whatever. And I think sometimes I'm like, God, how do I differentiate myself from the kind of chorus of voices telling clients that they care and know.
Which we'll get, and the branding. So in the branding, so this one here is about outreach and just getting messaging out. We do the branding workshop next month. That one is going to get much more focused in on messaging, but I'll give you some examples. I think it isn't the listening that's important, it's the responding that's important. And how you pay attention to things differently. To say you listen, yeah, you're right, that you're in a sea of listeners already. But it's how you respond to what you hear, and how you help when you hear these things, how do you help clients see things more clearly, more thoughtfully? It's your response to the listening that's important, not just the listening itself. And then Kristen has a good question to how to market to audiences or industries you haven't yet broken into. That's a great question. Is it a stretch or is it a leap? In other words,
yeah, it could be a leap. Not having the portfolio. Having something similar in your portfolio, but not yet having the exact match.
So this is where networking comes into play, because networking somebody, you have to be a trustworthy person with them versus somebody who's had the experience of working on that type of project. So networking and leaning into the right people and saying to them, hey, I'm really interested in like moving forward and getting into this type of project. Do you know people that I can talk to about that? I mean, it's a form of marketing. And tapping into your existing network for that. And because if you don't have the capability of the project for it yet, what you do have is, if you're with your network, a level of trust. And for somebody to be like, oh yeah, Kristen, I can see you doing that. Tapping into them about like, is there people that you can introduce me to, or maybe there's opportunities that I'm not aware of. That's how I would leverage it, to start with it as a conversation, and lean into it is the best way of putting it. Like, think of your website as something that maybe you just have a small little blurb about it, but within 6 months, maybe it's a bigger blurb. And maybe by the end of the year, it's something more substantive, as opposed to like, we do this, and you haven't yet done that yet. But networking, I would say, is probably your biggest. So lean into the people that already trust you. as an architect and know you are capable of doing that, as opposed to a stranger who doesn't see it.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. So
Sure.
next we can talk marketing. I mean, networking. Next we can talk networking.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to move on here. So now you got a list of content ideas that you now have a starter with. And what I want you to do is that, so hopefully you have a sense of what your annual revenues should be. Total revenues, gross revenues, not your margins, but your total revenues. And an ideal would be to have 3% of your whatever revenues you hope to earn, 3% of that is earmarked for marketing. And whether it's placing paid ads, whether it's on magazines, media outlets, media websites, maybe it's social media, maybe it's Google AdWords with displays. Maybe your revenue streams are high enough that maybe you could do something bigger, like advertising on broadcast or advertising out of home. But write down what your estimated annual revenue is, and then figure out 3% of that, and use that as a starting point for what your marketing budget should be. If you're not spending anything on marketing, if you're trying to be a revenue generating organization and you're spending nothing on marketing, you're on a wing and a prayer. It's a part of doing business. You hire a bookkeeper, hopefully, and there's value in hiring a bookkeeper. Put money into, at least 3% into marketing to get the messaging out there. So that top one is just a rough number. And then the second one, the marketing channels. So take a look at that first page of who your industries are and your audiences are, and that target. Where are they? And check off any of these here that they are there, and they are there that you could consider doing some sort of outreach activity in any of these channels, so that to bring awareness to you. So advertising out of home, so maybe that's going for MBTA signs, which is whole hog. Maybe it's print ads, maybe it's social media advertising. Maybe these articles that you could write, or articles that are either online or print posts. Lunch invites, cold calls, any community involvement. If you work within a certain geography, are there opportunities for, I'm not saying to set up a booth there, but just to go and have it be a networking opportunity. And maybe it's the Chamber of Commerce, and maybe it's a real estate agent or somebody that can help you have a conversation with them. Direct mail. It could be something simple of, if you're working on a property, say if it's especially if it's in a residential neighborhood, you have an entire street, you have your sign probably up front that shows, XYZ architect firm is working on this project and ABC contractor is working on it. But see if you can get the numbers of all the houses there. You don't have to find out who the residents' names are, and do a quick Staples runoff of like postcards like, hey, you may have noticed we're working on this house. Happy to chat if you wanted to hear about what's going on with this project. Tap into that locality. Or even door hooks. Email campaigns. I know for the work that I do, email campaigns have been the most effective for me. But I know that may not be the case for architects, especially if your clients are one-off clients. If it's a real estate developer, email campaigns might work for you. But if it's a residence, it's tough to promote. So maybe it's getting involved with some of the chambers or orgs. You know, maybe there's a community org, not forget the Chamber of Commerce, but just a community organization. Podcasts, press releases, SEO for improving your website so that people can find you and the work that you do easier. I'm not a big fan of telemarketers, but it's a fact of life, it's on there. Videos that could be homegrown, do videos on YouTube and have them hosted on YouTube, or maybe hosted on Vimeo and have them be part of your site. But these are the types of areas that for you to look at again. Where are the people that want, where are the people that would want to hire you? What are they looking at? And those are some of the places that you should be focusing in on where your marketing efforts are. Katie says here, let's see here. Susie says, does anyone here use yard sign outside a residential project under construction? Do you find they are worthwhile? Anybody wants to answer that?
I haven't done it, but I had the same question, Susie. Just wondering.
Yeah.
Contractors do it. If you're working in a neighborhood, why not? So people are always curious as who you're using for your contractors, your builders, your architects. You can try it.
Yeah,
Especially,
I noticed one recently down my street for David Whitney. I don't know if any of you know him. And I thought, oh, wow, I would never have known otherwise that he's working on that. And it seems like it could be a good idea.
Yeah.
There's plenty of design build firms that are out there. So they straddle both architect and builders. That's your competition. For those of you that are doing residential stuff. Katie says, I get the sense that some of our high-end residential clients don't always respond well to obvious paid ads or newsletters and instead rely on word of mouth referrals. Yes. Any advice for advertising, marketing subtly, just focus on print coverage and awards? Yeah, I think word of mouth referrals is a fantastic way of getting the word out, but time is stuck. The tricky thing is how do you have that so that it's a sustainable marketing method? So a few different things. This is back to maybe it is an email campaign that gets sent out once every quarter or once every 6 months. And if people like keep in touch with what we're doing, and by your clients seeing new products that are top of mind, when they have a friend or a neighbor that's considering doing work, you're top of mind to that high-end client. And they're like, oh yeah, I just got an email from so-and-so. So that you're using that email as a way of reminding them that you exist, even if they're not going to hire you anytime soon. That even if they just scroll it for a half second, I treat emails like billboards. It just goes past your screen. But if at the right time, if it goes past the screen and your neighbor's looking to get their kitchen redone, it's like, oh yeah, I just got an email from this company here. And so keeping yourself visible to those because when you never know that they're going to need, then you never know when they're going to need you, but also you never know when they're going to refer you. And it can also be certain things like maybe it's an annual card that you send out as part of your annual campaign to your existing clients, 6 months, a year later. Hope you're enjoying your new home. Hope you're enjoying your new kitchen. If there's any people that hand done card, send 4 of those cards out. Once a month, once every other month to different people. And again, that just keeps it top of mind. It's kind of a simple, elegant way of doing it. The question is finding the time to do it. So a couple of different options. You could do it yourself, obviously, but maybe you have somebody in your staff that could be like, hey, can you do me a favor on the first Friday of every month? Can you just sit with me for an hour to make sure that I write out these 4 cards to clients, just to follow up and just kind of let them know thinking of you. Little touch points like that. So, oh, and focusing at your question about focusing on print coverage and awards, absolutely. If you get some sort of print coverage or get some sort of award, that immediately goes on to Instagram, that immediately goes on to whatever social media channels are. That immediately gets posted on there, and you can pin it if it's something that's of significance. So if it goes on your Instagram feed, you can pin it so that it stays up top. You know, maybe a year later, when it's a little less in date, you can unpin it. Have something else in its place. So so now you have this all the ingredients of like who your audience are, you have some content ideas, and you have some channels, and now this is your chance to sort of put the ingredients together. It's almost like putting together a recipe. And so taking a look at those previous 3 pages and seeing like, okay, which audience, what piece of content, where do I put that content? And is there an ideal time to put it out there? Maybe it's based on a specific season or a specific time. Maybe it's 6 months after a project is completed. So it's not a seasonal thing. And then to answer your question, Kyle, about when, how do you find the time to do it? I strongly recommend like make it easy yourself. Like, I don't think it has to be like, if I don't get everything out weekly, it's just not going to happen. Like, okay, then don't do it weekly. Do it monthly. And if it's like, if I do it monthly, it's just not going to happen, then do it bi-monthly or do it every 6 months. Keep it at a cadence that's going to work for you. If you feel better about it and want to do more of it later on, but don't go whole hog. Look at like, quarterly, semi-annually, and saying, I'm going to spend 4 hours a day, once a quarter, and get somebody to be like, hey, whether it's somebody that's an accountability buddy or a partner or a staff person. And sometimes it's just like, just sit with me so that I do this. And you might feel like, oh, I'm spending money for this person sitting here, but you're actually doing it. Maybe you can delegate it to them. Maybe you have somebody on staff that like writing out those cards and somebody to go through and saying like, who can we reach out to? What 4 cards can we send out this quarter? Maybe they don't have to want handwriting it, but maybe they can come up with the text that should be in there and then you're handwriting it. And then in terms of, others like who will actually do it, obviously you could do it yourself. Maybe you have a staff member that's already on staff or a partner where you basically commit to once every X time frame. But you can also hire a seasonal marketing intern. I say seasonal because it may be like a summertime intern, students that are out of school that are looking for internship gigs. And maybe it's 10 to 15 hours a week. And they're the ones that's doing the grunt work or making sure things get out. Maybe it's hiring a virtual assistant. Lately, I've been hiring a virtual assistant, and I found that to be very effective in terms of having things like, I know what I want to get done. I just don't have the time to do it. I'll pay somebody more than a couple bucks to get it out, and there's been tremendous value with that. And I can refer you over to the one that I'm using. Maybe it's a freelance specialist, somebody that is a copywriter or a marketing person, or maybe it's a freelance, maybe it's a part-time marketing pro, a consultant or a coach, or maybe you want to go whole hog and hire an agency for it. And then, here's your chance to sort of sketch out like, okay, now you have the different components of who, what, where, when. And now put it onto a calendar of like, if there are certain things that you want to make sure that get sent out on any of these months.
Well, for this part, Bill, how do you think being as specific as possible is good, or do you think it's better to just get something down that's kind of broad brush? Like, what do you, and I guess.
As
a
of
follow-up
today, it's
question
better
is
to get
like-
something down as broad brush. Yeah.
Okay,
Whatever it takes. I mean, if you have something specific you want to write down, that's great. But if it's just broad brush, like get card out,
Yeah.
or do Thanksgiving promo, or, season, do Thanksgiving promo on Instagram, whatever, however simple or complicated you want it to be, just get something on here. This is meant to be a starter plan, not the, okay, you're done, ready to go. This is like just to get you started with it. Did that answer your question?
yes.
I'm going to press pause for a moment while you're going to do this. We're wrapping up towards the end. There's one more page I have after this. And go step off for a quick break, but I will be right back. But play around with this calendar.
As we've been going through this, everyone, I've been turning Bill's document into like a fillable PDF form. So I would have sent it out at the beginning, but it's like a little slow going, and I've been troubleshooting it as I've been breaking it. So anyway, my goal is when we finish, I can send this out. So if you're interested in receiving that, I'll share it with Bill, obviously, but any of you can just put your email address in the chat here, or if you don't want to put it there, you can like private chat me.
You talk about having an editable version of this form.
Yeah, I had Acrobat do like an auto version at the beginning, and it was terrible, and so I started with that, and then
I tried to do something quickly too, and I'm in the middle of grading for my course, and I
oh yeah,
able
that
to.
takes over.
But hopefully you can use a notepad separate from this.
Totally.
So.
If
So
I
then
get
the last
something that's
thing-
workable, I'll share it with you, Bill. You don't have
Great,
to-
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll reach out to you after. Thank you. So this is basically like, what are the next 3 steps to get your marketing out the door by the end of next month? Like, what are 3 things that you could do, say by the end of June, that you can do, that you can just little small steps? Maybe it's packaging a project and putting it up on Instagram. Maybe it's talking about a process, the process of going through a project and the result of that project, and maybe that's an email blast. Maybe it's reaching out to your network. I think it was Christian that was asking, which is basically like, I want to do this kind of work. So who are the 3 people that I can reach out to ask them to lean into it? Write down their contact info and say, okay, by the end of June, I'm going to reach out to these 3 people. The worst that's going to happen, they don't return your calls. The second worst that's going to happen is they return your calls and they say, I really don't know. The more likely of the 2 scenarios are they will return your phone call and they'll either say, I don't really know, but here's somebody else you can reach to, or they'll say, oh yeah, I definitely know someone here you can reach out to. So the worst of those scenarios is that they don't call you back. Can you live with that? The likely of the two scenarios are they're going to call you back and they're going to say, I have no idea, I know someone, or I can help with that. Make it as easy as possible and just set up like what are 3 things you can do between now and the end of June. And again, that includes your basic, there's so much more. There's courses taught on this and all sorts of things, but at least this gives you a foundation of something to work towards. What else can I do to be of help to people? And or what do you struggle with now that we've gone through this? Like, I just don't see myself doing this.
I will jump in just because I feel like the group is. Oh, Christina, you unmuted. You go first.
Well, I was going to say, while we have Bill here, what is your your top suggestions for networking? I feel like post pandemic, I got, we're so out of networking and I'm having a hard time restarting. So, because you've been talking about like relying on your network, and I can tell like I have to get back out there and doing more of it. And I'm
who is your audience? Who is your audience?
Well, that's part of the tough part is it's mostly residential clients.
Okay.
So it's very, friends of friends, word of mouth kind
And
of.
they're homeowners, right?
Homeowners, yeah.
Yep. So the networking part of it isn't necessarily something like great guns, like going to an event. Maybe it's like 3 of your clients or 3 of your friends, or maybe friends that are clients, and just say, hey, we'll just do some outreach for finding some more type of work that does this. Is there anybody that I can reach out to?
Mm-hmm.
It can be that simple. Would that feel uncomfortable for you?
Maybe a little bit.
Can you speak to why? Like maybe you've already done it before.
I think it's more of a cold direct pitch than I usually will do.
It's networking. It's literally like, hey, I'm looking for something. Like if you were looking for a job, full-time employment, and
right,
like you were like, hey, you know what, I want to get into IT and I can manage a staff of 5. Do you know anybody that's looking for an IT manager? Asking for a friend.
mm-hmm.
It's no more direct of a hit. It's sort of, for me, like I would flip that over to you. If a friend said to you, hey, Christina, I'm looking for someone that knows how to repair cars, and like a really custom car. I don't know, do you know anybody in your network that knows how to repairs cars? You might not know anybody, but would you feel uncomfortable about the conversation?
No, although to me, it's a slightly different conversation. That's a referral. I think
it's and across,
right.
I think, sure, that's more direct. But a networking is really leading to referrals, right?
Right.
I mean,
yes.
if you look at a network as being the only way you can be successfully networked is if you get a referral, then you're going to be freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at networking as like, I'll put the funnel back up. And if you look at networking, it's just creating awareness. That to me is networking.
Right.
And then I think there's other things like I also am a believer of like different events, whether they're community events or professional practice events. I only go to those things if I'm interested in the topic. I never go to those things with like, I'm gonna network. So for example, there's a UX UI event happening in Boston next week that I don't do UX UI, but that would be a good networking opportunity for me. And I have some colleagues that are presenting to it. I'm interested in going to it because it's like, yeah, let's see what they're doing for it. And so I'm going because I'm interested in it. Just as a topic I'm curious a little bit more about, helps me with my work when I'm talking to clients that do UX UI, that I can speak their lingo. I'm not going to it for networking, but I am making sure that I have business cards in my wallet.
Right.
So, and if it's something else like, you know, data visualization and how to do that, it's like, not really my jam. So it's like, no, I'm going to choose not to go to that. So for me, go to any events or group activities, whether they're online or in person or hybrid, because you're interested in the topic and have your business cards with you. Don't go to for the sake of like, well, I need to get out there and meet people. It's like, nah.
Right.
Share a file in the meeting. Oh, great. Thanks, Kyle.
Kristen,
I have a question. I have a question about advertising.
Yeah.
And if you have any recommendations for like advertising through Google or through local community papers or magazines, if there's something maybe more effective for us smaller architecture firms to.
So your clients are mostly geographic based, like within Massachusetts, New England, right?
Yes.
So whatever you do, you want to make sure that you're addressing that, because there's no point in you putting an ad in Architectural Digest. That's a national publication if you're very specific. But Dwell may have something that they may, Dwell or something similar, may have a regional special where maybe it's, you know, New England focused or seaside, you know, oceanside focused or something like that. Find out when that issue is and maybe consider putting in a quarter page ad. Maybe they only have a digital equivalent, which you're not going to get as much exposure with it, but it's still good exposure, right? So find an issue that's specific to the geography that you're trying to cover. One of the good things about Facebook and Google AdWords is that you can be like, find anything within X miles of this zip code. So you can keep it very geographic. And maybe people who have, you know, done searching on kitchen cabinets, like you can use Google to be very specific, and maybe finding out, you know, are there specific sites that I'm not as aware of, like New England centric interior design sites, for example, that are like not a firm, but a media outlet. See if there's any way of like tapping into being focused in with them.
Yeah, because we've talked about a couple of different avenues for advertising, Google Ads being one of them.
I'd say test it out. Put $400 or $500 into it. Do a test run and just see, because have you ever done one before?
No.
So like, I mean, even if you do $100, like, you know, first you'd be like, I don't know what to do or whatever. It's like, you know what, for $100, you're paying $100 to learn. And then you're like, oh, that worked. And maybe if I tweaked it and maybe if I did this instead. And so maybe in the next one you do $200. Or maybe you go through the motion of it, you're just like, that was so not worth my effort.
Right.
Like, I think it's better for you to do it and fail it than, or better, obviously better for you to do it and learn from it than it is for you not to do it. And Google AdWords and Facebook or Meta's backend. On the one hand, it's daunting. On the other hand, you can go to YouTube pretty easily and like, how do I advertise on Google? And you'll find a bunch of things pretty easily. Throw a couple $100 at it, cheap money at it, put some time into it, learn from it, make a decision of whether you pivot or drop it.
Thanks.
Bill, can you speak to hiring a PR professional? When is it appropriate? What services can they provide that marketing doesn't? Daniel, great question. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't promote myself as a PR person. And one of the big reasons for that is that a PR person is somebody who has a roster of media contacts at the ready. They know who to pitch to. So if I knew the people that worked at Architectural Digest and Dwell and whatever the Boston Common high-end newspaper that does interior design stuff there, or maybe it's the Boston Globe's Sunday magazine that has interior features. If I had connections to those reporters that are writing those stories, then it's worth hiring a PR firm. The other thing about a PR firm is that it's typically something that it's a long lead from the time you engage with the PR person to the time you craft a story, to the time that it gets pitched, to the time that a reporter says, I'll pick it up, to the time that it gets promoted, if it does get promoted, could be months. And so you're paying for a PR person to work through those months. I have had some success with writing a press release. So the tricky thing with it, and this is a more complicated question, more complicated answer than what you're asking me. What is a newsworthy story? Because to say like, look, we did this great kitchen, that isn't a newsworthy story. But if you did it, maybe you did a great kitchen that was for a family with people who are disabled and has universal design. And now there's a stronger bent to it. And so finding out reporters who might write about stories about universal design or the disability community and pitching specifically to them. You don't need a PR person to be able to do that. But you can do things like pay for, I got a client of mine that they did a major, they were the architect for one of the largest clean tech incubators in the Northeast. And we put together a PR package for them. And we paid the $800 to go on PR Newswire. And we got picked up nationally. And with that, others recognized, they got some inquiries from it. But it was a costly endeavor between hiring me to write the press stories, trying to put everything all together, and then paying the service to actually distribute it. Not the same thing as hiring a PR professional, more kind of a homegrown PR, but it was a one-off thing. So long-winded way of saying, a DJSA also depends on the size of your firm. If you're multi-million-dollar revenues, maybe it is worth you having a PR person that's on retainer. Maybe you have enough newsworthy story, sole practitioner. Yeah, okay. So it's tougher with a sole practitioner. I don't know much about independent PR people that you can find on the web. What I do know, there's two things, is that if you read an article for a reporter, if you read an article that you think is something like, hey, I could have a story similar to this, look at the reporter, find that reporter's contact info, send them an email, send them a phone call saying, hey, I have a story, you might be interested in doing it. No worries. So you can be your own PR person, but in terms of hiring a PR firm, it's typically $3,000 to $5,000 per month minimum, and it's typically at a 3 to 6 month engagement minimum. And for some companies that's worth it, but for some companies it's not. We're approaching 127 here.
I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up.
And talk about Legos.
Lego.
We have Legos coming up. So, Susie, are we still on for, is it? Let's see.
Sorry, I'm checking my calendar too. So this one was a little off because of my schedule. It wasn't the third Thursday, but I think we can go back to that third Thursday, so June 15th. We'll be in person at the BSA.
Yep.
You want to tell us a little bit about what to expect?
Yeah, so I'll see if I can find a couple of pictures for you. So it's an exercise that I've done in class. Let's see if I can find something quickly here. Hold on. We'll see how this goes. So there is actual a methodology that Lego has called Lego Serious Play. Harvard Business School has used it for a number of years. Stanford Design School has actually used this methodology. And there's actually a number of workshops and all sorts of things around here. And I've been trained in it, and I've run a couple of Lego Serious Play workshops. And the thinking is that sometimes if it's difficult for us to articulate something, our hands are better at figuring stuff out than our mouths and our brains are. So we will actually be using Legos. See if I can. So here's a student here who's coming up with, let's see what else. I'll work through prompts that you can use to figure out how to articulate your brand positioning. And there's an exercise that I do that involves other people to respond to different things. But we're actually going to be using Legos as a way of trying to build language that you could use for your brand positioning. Some of it may be language you're already using, some of it may be to change up how you're using it, some of it if you're not quite sure how to present, like what to talk about yourself, this is a great opportunity for it as well. So I've done this for personal branding for the past couple of years. This is my first time doing it for small business branding, so this will be an interesting experiment. At the very worst, we'll be playing with Legos. But my sense is that the feedback that I've gotten from people that I've done it with is that there's actually been a benefit that they've gotten out of it. So that's happening on June 15th on site at the Boston Society for Architects. And strictly on site because Legos are hard to put in the mail.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Bill. Thanks for the homework. I think it's always helpful to have this
My pleasure.
accountability that's on paper.
Yep.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us, and hope we might see you next month.
Great. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Instagram is also available if you want to do that. I appreciate everyone being here. I hope this helps get things started or at least shifted and moving. So glad to be here.